Now, across our borders, with more than 18,000 Palestinians killed in Israel's war against Hamas, a top Biden administration official says he has asked Israel's Prime Minister to transition from high-intensity operations to a more targeted phase of the war. Meanwhile, the Israeli military says it mistakenly killed 3 Israeli hostages in fighting in northern Gaza. VOA's senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain reports from the State Department.
The Israel Defense Forces said they mistakenly shot and killed 3 Israeli hostages who may have been abandoned or trying to flee their Hamas captors. The shooting happened during a military operation on Friday. More than 130 hostages are still being held in Gaza by the U.S.-designated terrorist group Hamas. Also on Friday, Al Jazeera cameraman Samer Abu Daqqa was killed in an Israeli attack in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. The news outlet says Israeli forces prevented medical teams from immediately reaching him. As the war continues to take an enormous toll on Palestinian civilians, the U.S. is calling on Israel to transition from a heavy assault to a more targeted phase of the campaign. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. At the White House, National Security Council Coordinator John Kirby said Sullivan discussed the progress of the war.
He did talk about possible transitioning from what we would call high-intensity operations, which is what we're seeing them do now, to lower-intensity operations sometime, in the near future. But I don't want to put a timestamp on it.
One expert told VOA he believes the U.S. push for Israel to scale down the assault on Gaza would have an impact.
I think that the Israelis probably in mid-January or toward the end of January are going to do precisely that.
Another expert agreed.
However, realistically, the Israelis must understand, as President Biden does, that these thousands of tragic deaths of Palestinian civilians can't go on, that it is what was once unqualified support for Israel's right to defend itself is becoming increasingly qualified to Israel's detriment. So certainly there will have to be some adjustments, but I think it's all a balancing act, really.
Protests against Israel's bombing campaign continue in the United States and elsewhere. Activists demanding a ceasefire blocked rush-hour traffic on a major